Can $1 of baking soda really replace every chemical in your pool store run? Yes, with one giant caveat: the pool store will never volunteer. The markup on this one chemical is the single most profitable line item on their entire shelf. And the day you figure out the substitute is the day they lose you as a customer. 28 years servicing residential pools, working out of a service truck across 3 different states, and the math on this one chemical has bothered me longer than anything else in the trade. Florida apprenticeship, then Arizona root work, then 18 years running my own company out of Texas. The chemical is sodium bicarbonate, baking soda, the same orange box powder the supermarket sells for under $1 a pound. The pool store sells the exact same chemical in a different bag with a different label for somewhere between 5 and 20 times the price. Stick around to the end. There is a 2-reading diagnostic anyone can run with a basic test kit that tells you whether your alkalinity quietly crashed last month, which is why most cloudy pools stay cloudy no matter how much chlorine the owner dumps in. Pour yourself a coffee for this one. The pool industry has been running a quiet shell game on sodium bicarbonate for as long as I have been in the trade. The same chemical, in 3 different aisles, at 3 completely different prices. Aisle 1, the supermarket baking aisle, Arm & Hammer baking soda, 1 pound box, about $1. The little orange box that lives in every kitchen in America. Aisle 2, the hardware store pool section, pool-grade sodium bicarbonate in a 5-pound or 10-pound bag, roughly $4 to $7 depending on the size. Sometimes the same Arm & Hammer logo, sometimes a generic store brand. Same chemical, same purity grade. Aisle 3, the chain pool store. A glossy white pail labeled something like alkalinity up, or pH buffer, or alkalinity increaser. 8 pounds for $25 to $30. The label has a swimmer on it. If you flip the pail over and read the ingredient line on the back, it says sodium bicarbonate, same chemical, same purity. 3 times the markup of the supermarket version, 4 to 5 times the markup of the hardware store version. I have been buying it from the supermarket for 28 years. I keep a 40-pound restaurant supply bag of Arm & Hammer in the garage on a shelf my wife specifically designated for chemicals not allowed anywhere near the kitchen, which is a rule that traces back to one incident with muriatic acid we do not talk about. The cost per pound on the bulk bag is about 60 cents, about the price of a stick of gum. For perspective, a typical pool service company truck running a route in the Tampa area carries the same 40-pound bulk bag, marks it up to $9 per pound on the invoice, and itemizes it as alkalinity adjustment supplies. I know because I used to do root work there during my Florida apprenticeship years. The supply house counter guy used to slide the receipts across like poker chips. He used to say the markup was the only honest part of the business because everyone in the trade knew it and nobody told the customer. That is the shell game. 1 chemical, 3 packages, 3 prices, and a pool store shelf full of complimentary bottles designed to fix problems that the same one chemical, dosed correctly, would have prevented from happening. The reason this markup hurts so much is not the dollars. It is that the pool store is selling you the keystone chemical of your entire water system and then handing you 4 more bottles to fix the problems that the broken keystone is causing in the first place. Total alkalinity, abbreviated TA on most test kits, is the buffer in your water. The buffer is what keeps pH from swinging every time the sun comes up or a rainstorm passes through. Think of TA as the shock absorbers on your truck. Without them, every bump in the road translates straight into the cab. With them, the cab stays level. Pool water with healthy TA does the same thing. pH stays roughly where you put it. Chlorine works the way the chart says it should. Equipment surfaces hold their finish. The target range on most chlorine pools is 80 to 120 parts per million of total alkalinity. About the buffering range where pH stops doing acrobatics every time it rains, give or take depending on your fill water chemistry. When TA drops under 60, the shock absorbers are gone. pH starts swinging from 7.4 in the morning to 8.1 by afternoon and back to 7.3 overnight. Every chlorine molecule in the water is working at a different effectiveness rate depending on what the pH happens to be in that hour. Most pool owners never catch this. They test pH once a week, see a reading in the normal range, and assume the chemistry is balanced. The reality is, the pH was bouncing all week, and they happened to catch it on Saturday morning when it landed near the target. Test the same pool Sunday at 3 in the afternoon, and you get 7.9. Same water, different time. A pool with crashed alkalinity will look like it has every other problem. Algae blooms easily because chlorine effectiveness keeps cratering during pH spikes. Cloudy water hangs on for weeks because the chlorine you dose Saturday is barely working by Tuesday afternoon when pH has climbed. Plaster surfaces etch because pH dropped below 7 during the swinging cycle. Vinyl liner pools fade in shaded corners for the same reason. Owners blame the chlorine, the filter, the heat, the kids. The real cause is a 60-cent buffer fixed the pool store labeled as alkalinity up and sold to them for $30. That is the trap. They sold you the keystone, then sold you the bandages for the problems the missing keystone caused. Brilliant business model if you are running a pool store. Less brilliant if you are the one writing checks every month. Everything in this video, and the full 85 technique system behind it, is in the Pool Owner's Bible. 296 pages covering pool chemistry made simple, green water recovery in 48 hours, chlorine and salt system comparisons, equipment troubleshooting that saves you the $200 service call, and the hardware store substitutions that cut your seasonal chemical bill by hundreds of dollars. Plus a quick reference card you can tape inside your equipment shed so you always know the right move when the water turns. If you are tired of fighting your pool every summer, throwing money at the pool store, and still ending up with green water in July, this is the reference you have been waiting for. Link in the description below, QR code on screen. Here is where the title's 24-hour promise actually delivers on the chemistry. I have watched this play out on the routes I have run, on pools that had been cloudy for 2 and 3 weeks, despite the owner dumping chlorine like it was free. The diagnostic looks almost embarrassing once you know what to read. Pool has had chlorine added consistently. Free chlorine reading shows up at 2 or 3 parts per million. Water still cloudy, or stuck in that pale jade haze where you can almost but not quite see the main drain. pH reads anywhere from 7.3 to 8.2, depending on what time of day you tested it. Total alkalinity sits in the 30 to 50 range, well below the 80 minimum. That pool is in chemistry purgatory. The chlorine is technically present. It is just not allowed to work because the pH is moving too fast for any of it to find a stable killing window. Algae spores and dead organic load are floating in water that has chlorine sitting next to them but never quite getting to them. The fix is sodium bicarbonate. Add enough baking soda to bring total alkalinity up to 90 parts per million. The math is roughly 1.5 pounds of baking soda per 10,000 gallons of water to raise TA by 10 parts per million. About the contents of 1.5 supermarket boxes. A typical 15,000-gallon pool sitting at TA 40 needs around 10 to 12 pounds of baking soda to climb to 90. Pour it slowly, broadcast across the surface in front of a running return jet, with the pump on filter mode. What happens next is the part that looks like magic but is just chemistry doing the job it was supposed to do all along. Within 4 to 6 hours, pH stops bouncing. It settles wherever the new buffer puts it, usually between 7.4 and 7.6. The chlorine that was being burned by pH swings now has a stable environment to work in. The pool finishes oxidizing whatever organic load was hanging in suspension. Within 24 hours, water that had been cloudy for 3 weeks is clear. Same chlorine the owner had been adding the entire time. New buffer chemistry. I have walked owners through this over the phone more times than I can count. The first time I tried this fix as an apprentice in Florida, I overshot the alkalinity to 160 parts per million. Ended up chasing pH downward for a week with muriatic acid, and learned that more is rarely better in pool chemistry. Took me an embarrassing number of years to slow down on the dose and trust the retest. Before anyone runs out and starts treating baking soda like the universal pool fix, this is where the title's promise hits its honest limits. Baking soda raises total alkalinity. That is the entire job. Anyone telling you it does more than that is either confused or selling something. And the most important boundary in this whole video is the one I am about to draw next. Sodium bicarbonate does not sanitize. There is no chlorine in it, no bromine, no ability to kill bacteria or algae. A pool run on baking soda alone with no chlorine is a recreational water illness waiting to happen. The CDC Healthy Swimming Program lists multiple pathogens that thrive in unsanitized pool water, including Cryptosporidium, Pseudomonas folliculitis, and various strains of E. coli. None of them care how good your alkalinity reading is. You need a sanitizer in the water at all times. Chlorine, bromine, or salt-generated chlorine. There is no chemistry workaround for that. And anyone selling you one is risking your family's health to make a quick clip go viral. It also will not lower pH. If your pH is already running high, baking soda makes it slightly worse, not better. For pH down, you need muriatic acid or dry sodium bisulfate. Different aisle, different chemical. Calcium hardness is another non-job. Soft water pools that need calcium chloride to protect plaster surfaces will not get help from sodium bicarbonate. That is a separate chemical for a separate problem. Stabilizing your chlorine against UV burn-off is its own chemical. Cyanuric acid, the stabilizer that protects free chlorine from being eaten by sunlight, lives in a separate aisle and works on a separate mechanism. Same chemistry I covered in the chlorine consumption video. Where you stop and call a pro is anything outside the chemistry envelope. Cracked plaster, a leaking skimmer throat, a pump throwing breakers, a salt cell reading low voltage on the rectifier. Equipment problems need equipment diagnostics. Anything involving pump motor wiring or main drain cover work on a pool built before 2008 requires bonding to a common grounding grid and compliance with the VGB Act, the federal standard on drain cover entrapment safety. The chemistry side you can handle as a homeowner. The electrical and structural side needs a licensed pro. The actual application is uncomplicated once the numbers are in front of you. Test total alkalinity with a real test kit, not a strip. I keep coming back to the Taylor K2006 because it reads alkalinity accurately to within 10 parts per million, which is the resolution you actually need. The Lamote Color Q Pro 7 does the same job digitally if you prefer numbers over color matching. Strips can be off by a full range on alkalinity. And on this specific chemical, the difference between 60 and 120 parts per million is the difference between fix the pool and overshoot it. Calculate how much baking soda you need based on the gap between your current T/A reading and your target of around 90. The pool calculator on the Trouble Free Pool website runs this math for you in about 10 seconds. Plug in your gallons, your current TA, your target TA, and it tells you the dose in pounds. Spread the baking soda slowly across the pool surface in front of a running return jet. Some will settle to the bottom before fully dissolving. That is fine. Brush the floor after about an hour to help it dissolve. Run the pump on filter mode for another 6 hours, then retest. If you are working with a vacation rental or a heavily used pool, you may need to repeat the dose every 3 to 4 weeks during peak summer. My route stops in the San Antonio area, with heavy weekend usage typically need a baking soda touch-up around once a month from June through September. The math on what this saves an owner over the life of a pool is where the story gets uncomfortable. A typical residential pool needs alkalinity adjustment somewhere between 4 and 12 times a year, depending on rainfall, bather load, and how aggressive the local water chemistry is at draining the buffer. At the pool store price of $25 to $30 per 8-pound pail, an average owner buying alkalinity up from the pool store is spending $100 to $300 a year on what amounts to repackaged baking soda. Over 10 years, that is $1,000 to $3,000 on a chemical that costs around $40 to $70 a decade if bought at the supermarket. The pool company down the street from a customer of mine in Tampa charges $180 a month for weekly service. They are using the same baking soda from their bulk supply truck and charging it back through the service ticket at premium per dose. 10 years of that service contract is $21,600 in fees, of which roughly $400 is for the actual buffer chemistry, and the rest is for emptying skimmer baskets and dumping a gallon of liquid chlorine. Think about that number. $21,000 over a decade for 15 minutes a week of work, plus the chemicals you can grab at the supermarket on the way home from the grocery store. Look, everything I'm walking through here is in the Pool Owner's Bible. 296 pages, all 85 field-tested techniques, pool chemistry, green water rescue, chlorine and salt systems, equipment diagnostics, plus the hardware store substitutions that cut your seasonal chemistry bill by hundreds of dollars with a quick reference card for the equipment shed. 3 decades of pool service knowledge in one place. No more pool store guesswork. No more $40 jugs of branded baking soda. No more fighting your pool every summer. Link in the description, QR code on screen. Comments coming, let me address them. The pool store told you to use soda ash instead of baking soda. Soda ash is sodium carbonate, a different chemical that raises both alkalinity and pH aggressively. It has a place when both readings are low together. When your alkalinity is low but your pH is in range or high, soda ash overshoots pH and creates a new problem you have to fix. I used to default to soda ash for any low alkalinity reading. Took me about 15 years to figure out I was creating pH spike calls for myself the following week. Baking soda is the gentler tool for alkalinity-only adjustments. Both have a place, but soda ash is not the default for buffer chemistry the way pool stores often present it. Just shock the pool store advisor told you. Shock raises free chlorine. It does not raise total alkalinity. If your buffer is crashed, shocking adds chlorine that gets burned by pH swings, just like the chlorine that was already there. Shock chemistry and buffer chemistry are separate problems that need separate solutions. But the label says industrial grade or pool grade. It does not actually matter. Sodium bicarbonate is sodium bicarbonate. Food grade, pool grade, and pharmaceutical grade have purity differences measured in parts per million of trace elements that do not matter at all for a 15,000-gallon residential pool. You are buying the same chemical regardless of which box it comes in. The supply house counter guy in Florida used to call the pool grade label the most expensive sheet of paper in the industry. 28 years in, I have not seen anything to argue with that. This is the part I almost did not include. It is one of those tools that sounds too simple until you actually run it on your own pool, and once you do, you stop looking at cloudy water the same way again. The alkalinity crash diagnostic. Anyone with a basic test kit can run it. Costs nothing beyond the reagents you already own. Tells you in 2 readings whether your buffer is the silent problem behind every cloudy week, every algae bloom you cannot explain, every gallon of chlorine that seems to disappear into nothing. Test your pH first thing in the morning, before the sun has been on the water for more than 30 minutes. Write the number down. Test pH again at 3 in the afternoon, after the sun has been driving photosynthesis and gas exchange in the water all day. Write that number down. If your morning pH and your afternoon pH differ by more than 0.3 on the pH scale, your alkalinity is too low to hold the buffer. That is the entire test. 2 readings, 6 hours apart, on a day with reasonable sun and no rain. If your morning reading is 7.3 and your afternoon reading is 7.8, your TA is crashed even. If your test kit shows a reading in the so-called normal range. The reason the standard TA test sometimes lies is that the reagent measures total alkalinity, including bicarbonate alkalinity and carbonate alkalinity together. And on some pools with unusual water chemistry, the total number can look acceptable while the bicarbonate portion that actually buffers pH is gone. The pH swing test does not lie. It is the water telling you directly whether the buffer is doing its job. Service companies rarely run this diagnostic because they test once a week at the same time of day on every route stop. Same single reading every visit. Owners who run the morning and afternoon comparison once a month catch crashed alkalinity weeks before any service tech would notice. $1 of baking soda and a single test kit reading later, the buffer is back and the rest of the pool chemistry starts behaving itself. An owner on the Trouble-Free Pool forum posted his year of data on this diagnostic last summer. Tracked pH morning and afternoon every Saturday for 12 months on his pool in the Texas Hill Country. The neighbor across the cul-de-sac had nearly the same pool, same water source, same usage. His stayed clear all year on roughly half the chlorine of his neighbor's. The difference was he caught crashed alkalinity twice and dosed baking soda within 48 hours of each catch. The neighbor was paying a service company $200 a month and got a green pool in August anyway. Same equipment, different diagnostic discipline. Pick a Saturday morning. Buy a 40-pound bag of Arm & Hammer from the warehouse club. Run the morning and afternoon pH check the following weekend. If the swing is more than 0.3, you have your answer. The pool owners who know this do not post about it on the neighborhood Facebook group. Not because it is secret, because it sounds too cheap to actually work until you watch your own water finally start behaving. $1 of kitchen powder, one test kit you already own, 10 years of pool store markup you stop paying. The buffer chemistry does the rest.